All right. So now in the last class, what did we see? Yeah, so we were seeing some parameters and how do you get into the job deeply. That's what we were seeing, right? So to talk about few others, let's talk about the continuous integration part along with the Jenkins. So now the first thing that we have to do is, what is continuous integration? So continuous integration is all about, you have to perform some build step or some activity based on a check-in that's going to happen. So for that, what is that we need? So the first thing what we need is, we need to monitor or keep polling a repository that we have, and based on that, if there is any action that happens, we need to do some build. Right. So in that case, the first thing what we need is, we need a repo where we need to keep polling. So this will be based on some schedule that what we said, we will be keep on polling. And when the polling happens, if it finds a new check-in or a new commit, then what it should do is, it should do some build step or whatever that we have done. If not, it should not be doing anything. So that is what our actual requirement is, continuous integration is, to keep it as very simple. So for that, first we need a repo which we can monitor. Okay, so I have a test repo that I've created based on Maven. Okay, so let's use that itself. Ah, sorry, it's GitHub. Okay, so now I've already logged in, so that's the reason I'm getting this home page directly. So I have two repositories which I've already have in my GitHub. Okay, so now again, regardless of what site or where exactly you are doing, what's more important is, where is your repository and what is the path to access your repository. So in my case, to access my repository, which is onlinely stored in this GitHub, so I'll use this path. Okay, so if you can see, this is my actual path to access the repository. So how do you work on to that? So the first thing what we need is, let's create a job. Okay, so we'll create a new job and I'll call it as a CI job. Okay, now let's not worry about this. So let's go here and we'll say, where is that we want to run? So I'll give the label as test. Okay, that's done. And then the next step, which is important, is SEM. Now we know that we have a part which talks to the SEM, or we have to do something with the SEM. And as part of it, what is the repository that we are going to talk? This is the repository which we need to monitor through Jenkins. So the first thing what the SEM part will tell us, what is that repository where you want to connect through Jenkins. So that is what the information that you will be giving here. So in our case, by default, it gives Subversion. And since we have installed a plugin for Git, we are getting this. So correspondingly, suppose say you're working on Perforce or ClearCase and you have to install that plugin, and you will be getting a option for that plugin correspondingly. So now here in the Git, if you open up, it's asking for some details. So the basic details is, which is a repository through which you want to connect to the Jenkins. So here I'll give the path whatever that I've used. Okay, so I'm saying, as part of this CI job, always try to do some action in the Git. And if that is the case, this is a repository which we want to connect. And since it is a private account, not a public account, it will be password protected. So here you can use the credentials to store. So basically you can click on add and you can give on the username and password and it will get stored. In case in your organization, it will be taking the default user ID, whatever has been given, and you will be setting something called as passwordless SSH. So through that passwordless SSH, all the servers and applications that you're using will not require password. So if you log in, the same password can be used across everyone so that it doesn't ask you. Okay, but other than that, if you're using any application explicitly with a different ID, then you have to give the username and the password to connect. So right now, this is my email and the ID for connecting. So on some of the projects, you might have to connect to more than one repository because, as I said, each repository is pertaining to a product, but sometimes you can have a suite of products for which you can combine everything together. Say, for example, your company is creating operating system itself. Okay, so in that, the operating system will have many components, okay, wherein each of the component can itself be treated as a product separately. So if you want to release a particular component as a separate product or a standalone product, you will try to work on only that. Suppose if you're delivering everything as a suite, then you have to get everything together. So that's when you can add as many repositories as you want based on your need. Okay, so let's here take one simple example. Now, this is what the repository that I want to work. And now we know that in the repository, it's nothing but the layer called branch on which we will be working. So what is the branch on which you want to specifically work on this repository of Git? So that is what the next thing that we will say. Okay, so here by default, again, I'm not doing any changes. I've kept it everything as it is. So I'll be working on the default branch called master itself. Okay, and this should be pretty much enough. Suppose if you want to do some custom action, okay, and then you can choose these kind of behaviors, like say you want to run some trigger or you want to create some directory before working, like that. If there is anything specific that you want to work, then you can act as a custom step and you can give the default options that is available. So these options are only available on the latest version of Jenkins as part of the Git plugin, and it's not available in the previous one. Okay, so in case if you're wondering why I'm not seeing it, it is because it was coming as a separate plugin. But now everything has been integrated and they're giving just one simple Git plugin, which will have all the options. So once you have choose the details on what repository, what and all you want to do on that and specifications of that repository, now the next step is how do you connect to this? Because we have just given the information about the repository and we have not yet told anything about when to connect and how to connect, right? So how do you tell that? So that is when we have to go back to the build triggers and use this option. But the difference between the normal scheduled and the continuous integration is I don't want now Jenkins to keep on running whatever I give. Say, for example, in the build step, I will give something that I want to do the build. Okay, so in that case, if I give it as build periodically, what will happen? Say, if I ask it to run it every 5 minutes, what it will do? Every 5 minutes, it will go and run the step. That is what it will be doing, right? But what we want as a continuous integration is only when a check-in or a commit happens and to which repository, to this repository. So in that case, we should not be using build periodically. So what is that we can use? So that is when we have a special function called poll SEM. Okay, so now if you use this, what you can do is now regardless of what kind of repository that you have given on the top, whatever that you have associated, that it could be one or more, what Jenkins will do is whatever the time period that you have given, based on that it'll go and poll for all the repositories that you have given. For example, I want to poll every minute. Okay. Now, what is it going to do? So Jenkins every minute will go to the repository, whatever you have configured in the SEM column, and here it will check whether it has a new commit that has been done. Okay, so that is its duty, nothing else. So we will get this very first step achieved, wherein given a scheduled time, Jenkins will automatically go to the repository that was specified and keep on polling data. Okay, now while polling data, only if there is a new commit that is obtained, it will proceed further. And in case if there is no new commit found, it will not do anything and it will just stop here itself. Okay, so that is the difference between poll SEM and build periodically. And the other option is, suppose if you are using specific to GitHub, like what I'm doing, I can make use of this. But other than that, if you're not using GitHub, then this option will not be suitable. So you can always go with the standard poll SEM and it will work for all the options. Okay, so what we have said now is, I have created a job with a specific repository and asking Jenkins every minute to check whether there is a new check-in happening or not. Okay, in case if there is a new commit that happens here, what is it has to do? So that is what we will be giving it as part of our build step. Okay, so in the build step, based on what options that you want to call, you can call. Suppose if you want to invoke a Maven, or you want to invoke Ant, or simply if you want to call your own script or list of commands, you can use the options based on your need. Say your project is a Java based project and you're using Maven. Okay, then you can use the configuration that we have set earlier in the local configuration, sorry, the global configuration that we did, right? So here, if you see, we are using that configuration, whatever we have done. Okay, and through that, we are going to call some options. So what is that goal that you want to run? Suppose you want to create the package, you can simply say package and it will be working. If not, you can simply give some commands. And for now, let's try this. Okay, so we'll say, hey, there is a new commit found. Okay, so we will just try to print this message. Okay, now this is what we want to do. So what is the job doing? The job is going to poll every 1 minute at this repository, and in case if it finds, it will try to run a step called printing this message. This is what it is going to do. Now the point here is, how will Git, or how will Jenkins know that there is a new check-in? Because to know whether there is a new check-in or not, you should be knowing what is the latest commit that is available, all right? So if I ask you to just, for example, you come here, okay? Now what is the latest commit ID? You have something called 2DD54F8. Now if I ask you whether there is a new commit, only if you know this, you can say that, okay, now if you get something new, different, then you will say, okay, sometime back I saw it was this, but now I say there is some other commit ID, so I believe that there is a new commit ID. So only if you have some reference, you will be able to tell what is the new commit ID that is happening or not. So in the same case, how can Jenkins tell that? So pretty much to tell this, what does Jenkins needs? Jenkins needs to know all this information. So how can it know? So what Jenkins will be doing is, by default, whenever you are associating your job with some kind of SCM repository, it will automatically create a workspace in your location. Okay, so what do you mean by that? So going back to the basics, forget about all these things. So when you run this job, what will happen? It will choose any of the machine that is available in this label. So in our case, which one? It will go to this test CentOS, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. And in that, what it will do, it will go to this directory. And in this directory, what is it going to do? It will create a folder called workspace, and inside that it will create a folder called CI, and in that whatever that you have given, it will be running this step, isn't it? Do you remember?
Yeah, right.
So okay, I already had one. Okay, so now that is what it will be doing. So in the same directory, what Jenkins will do is, since you have something related to the SCM here, so to know whether there is a new commit or not, it should know what is the latest commit ID available. So hence, Jenkins will create a workspace inside this folder here. Okay, so that means in the CI folder that whatever Jenkins will be creating, inside that it will make a workspace out of this repository, whatever that you have given. So you don't have to tell what is the repository and what is the command that you have to do. It'll automatically create. And in our case, we know to create a workspace in Git, we have to simply clone. So whenever Jenkins is running, first thing it needs is it needs a clone of that repository, whatever you have mentioned here, inside this folder, CI folder, right? So now to do that, we don't have anything right now. So how will Jenkins compare with this repository? So when you run Jenkins for the first time, I mean this job for the first time, it will create the CI folder here and it will clone this repository. And as soon as it clones, now whatever content you have will also be available in this place. So Jenkins will now know that what is the latest commit ID available, and going forward from the next time it will compare with what is that available in this workspace with what is there in the central repository that you have mentioned. But for the first time, since we don't have anything, what it will do, it will try to create the workspace and run the job for the first time. So going forward, the next time when you run, it will try to check, and only if there is a new commit which is available in the central repository and not available in the Jenkins workspace, then it will try to first integrate this workspace. So Jenkins will have a workspace now, right? So this will get updated in the sense, in our case it will do a git pull and it will update the current workspace with whatever modifications that we have done here. Okay, so let's try that first and see how it exactly works. So I have given this. So let's apply and save. So just let's wait for a few minutes. So it basically taking some 5 seconds initially, and after that it'll work. So if you go here, what is it doing? It is using the test CentOS machine available in this label, and then here it is calling the exe which we have specified in the initial configuration, and in that what it is doing, if you look closely, it is creating a folder called CI in the root home directory of this machine, and inside that it is trying to create the workspace. Okay, and then it is trying to run for the first time, which is default. So now if you go, you can see this CI folder, and correspondingly if you see, you can see all the files which is available in this repository. The same thing is available here as a project. Okay, so if you want to see this, uh, Let's go to that folder. Okay. Okay. So now, okay. So now here we have the latest commit ID. So going forward now, every 1 minute, what Jenkins will do is it will check this workspace of Jenkins. What is the latest commit ID against the commit ID which is available in this repository. So now if there is any difference, then it assumes that you have modified. So first thing what it will do, it will update this workspace with the latest change and then go ahead with whatever step the build that you have mentioned. Okay, so that is what it is going to do. So how do we know whether it is working or not? So in the job, since I have given a git polling, you will have a log for polling. Okay. So now if you see, last time when we ran, it was some 2 minutes back. So every 1 minute it is updating. And now it is saying that the change, whatever we have, is the same already, which is available with us. So there is no new changes that is obtained. So like this, every 1 minute, this will get updated or it will be refreshed when Jenkins tries to connect. Okay, so now what we'll do is let's try to do a simple change and we will push it into this repository. Okay, so what I'll do now is so okay, so now I'm just trying to do is let me create a clone based on this. Okay, so I'm going to say git clone and this is the source and I will say test CI. Okay, what I'm doing is I'm just acting as a user and I'm trying to create a clone of this workspace. Okay, so you got it. Now, inside this, if you do the same thing, you can see the latest commit ID is the same as what we have here. Where is that? Same thing. Okay, so now let's do some changes and update. So we have a file here called readme. All right, so if I open this readme, there's some line. So let me change this September to the current date. So I'll say October 24. Okay. So now we have changes. So we will add it. So I'm saying test CI commit for October 24th class. So corresponding to this, we would have got a new commit ID. Okay. And that is 625 EO6E. And this is available only in this workspace. It's neither available here nor it is available in the Jenkins workspace, right? So now in this, quickly I'll do a git push. Okay, so okay, even before that, let me show you this. So this is the file that the Jenkins has opened up, right? The workspace. So if you see here, you do not see the latest because it is still pointing to the oldest one. So now here, let's do a git push. So what I'm going to do from my local workspace, we are pushing the changes to the central repository that is available in the GitHub. Okay, so it has pushed. So now if you refresh this, you can see that it has modified. It has also modified here, right? So quickly, let's check on this Jenkins log. Okay, so it has not done anything yet. So let's wait for almost now it should have done. Yes. So 8443, it should have done the polling again. So right now, if you see, it says there is a new revision obtained after this, that is 625. So it is saying changes found. And with respect to that, it has already started the build. So what will it do? So the first thing that it will do is it will go to this workspace, okay, and it will update it with the new commit ID. Okay, so if you open this old screen, that what we have, this is what we have, right? So now if you see, it would have updated with the latest one. So correspondingly, we would have got this content also. Okay, so then that is what it will do as part of the continuous integration, and followed by whatever steps that you have given. Suppose now if you want a workspace, so there is no need for a separate workspace in Jenkins, because whenever you're working with a repository, Jenkins will automatically create a workspace for us. So we can make use of this, and if needed, you can manipulate it. It's not mandatory that you should be using, but anyhow, Jenkins will be creating. So you can make use of this, and you can do the build here itself, because this is going to have all the files. So whatever steps that you want to run, typically you can give this inside the workspace here. So what do I mean by that? Now, where exactly this step is running? This step. So this is running inside this CI workspace or CI folder, right? So if you look at the output, where exactly it is running? It is running inside the CI folder inside the workspace. That's what we know, that it always runs. That means it is running inside this. So by default, it is running whatever commands that you're giving inside the workspace. So now you can go ahead and run your build directly from this workspace. So if you are giving any commands here, for example, I'm trying to run a Maven command. Okay, so if I give the Maven command, what is it going to do? So it is going to run inside this folder directly. So like that, based on the workspace that you have created, suppose if the folder is something different, then make sure that whatever commands that you want to run will be based on this directory path. For example, if there is some other directory and you want to run it inside it, say for example, go inside src. So from this place, if I say cd src, what it will do, it will go inside this folder. That is because we know that the current working directory for that job is this folder. So with the reference of this, you have to give the relative path always, and then run whatever actual build that you have to do. Getting it on how exactly the continuous integration work?
Adam, like if you are changing just any code changes inside the workspace, right? It won't be visible in the repository, but the build will run, right?
Yeah, so typically continuous integration is for our purpose to capture a developer's change. So we will not be
Mhm.
doing any modifications because this is a build workspace. In the build workspace,
Okay.
we will be doing the build based on someone else changes. So it will not be our change. So never in my history I've modified a
Okay.
code in a
Okay.
build workspace, because the developers change the code, they submit, and we take it and we do the build.
Okay. One scenario, in case because in SVN we have the versions, we can revert back the version numbers.
Yeah.
But in Jenkins, that is only the ID you are telling. Commit ID only, based on the commit ID we can revert.
Yes, exactly. So now
For
we need to
example, this.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah. Please continue.
No, no, go ahead.
No, for example, the first build is running fine. Okay, second build we found the error. Okay,
Hmm.
and third build again we went, again third build also found. So probably we know, okay, the first build some committed is working fine, second build we found that that's a committed not working. So until the resolving this that error, we can go with the previous build and we can give the binary. Okay, that is some scenario. We can give the commit changing. We can change the commit ID based on that.
Yeah, it is a regular concept. So, like what you are saying, whenever you found some problem, and if you want to
Mhm.
revert, yeah, even in Git we can revert. So you can revert the commit, whichever you feel is causing the problem, and then
Okay, in the
you
JIT
submit
level
it.
we can reward.
Yeah, you
Okay,
can revert
okay,
there, or you can revert here itself.
okay,
See, it's all the same. So how do you do it is just a
fine.
process. So now
Correct, correct,
to test it, you need a separate workspace. So that's what we'll do is we will, if you have a separate workspace, you can try to have a clone of this and try to do the
correct,
build. And if it fails again there, you will do a revert of whatever that commit or check-in has done.
correct. Okay,
And before
okay,
committing or before doing a check-in, you will run a test build there to verify whether the revert is working fine. Because sometime it
fine.
could be
Okay,
an intermittent issue also, or there could be 2 to 3 check-ins went together and you might be reverting a wrong check-in, or that check-in
okay,
alone is not sufficient to revert. So that way you first do the test and everything is working fine, then you can do a commit. So
fine.
again,
Okay,
once you do a commit, the process will go once again. So whenever you find a new commit, you will get, or if you want, you can stop this until you get a new check-in, and whenever someone says that there is a new check-in, you can try to use that time and run the build based on that latest commit.
okay. This reward change, reward ID, check commit ID, it will automatically pull
It
in the
won't do.
build
No,
Jenkins or site.
Jenkins
It
will
won't do,
not
right?
do that automatically because, as I said in the first class, it is just a framework. So it doesn't have any
Okay,
intelligence of these things. So we need to write some kind of
okay,
tool or some mechanism through which we can try to debug what exactly is the problem.
fine. Okay then. Fine.
Varun, getting it?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Just a minute. I'm sorry. Okay. So now, since I was saying the important thing that you need to notice, whatever commands that you're giving, whatever steps that you're running will always run with respect to the Jenkins workspace. So make sure whatever that you're using should be with reference of this. Okay. Now, since you were talking Gokul specifically, I'll take up the next kind of concept in the same. So in Jenkins, we have a concept wherein we will have some dependencies, and in case if you have some dependencies, you can run job based on another job. Okay, so what exactly does it mean? Many times you might be having one scenario wherein one job, whatever that you have configured, has to be triggered based on another job. Okay, suppose like let's take two components like A and B, or two products A and B. So the B product is dependent on A. So whenever you build A, B should also be getting triggered. A scenario could be one. Or let's take one of the example which Gokul was just asking. If you want to do certain things based on the result of the first job, so that is when in Jenkins we can have, okay, let me use this. In Jenkins, we can have the dependencies between two jobs. Okay, so how does this dependencies work? So let's assume I have a job here. Okay, so and I have one more job. So Okay, now let's call this as job A. Okay, and this as job B. So what exactly this dependency means? So when we are talking about dependencies, we have two ways. One is downstream dependency, the other one is upstream dependency. So pretty much upstream is not so, practical usage is very limited, but downstream is the one which everyone would be using it widely. So what exactly does it mean by downstream dependency and how do we have it between two jobs? So now for this job, what will you do? You will give some task or configuration to do, right? Similarly, here also you will do. And now to run this, what will you do? You will schedule some time and you will schedule some time. And if not, we will do the on-demand basis by clicking the build now. So that is what we know. But let's take a scenario where the B is dependent on A. So in that case, now if we want the job A to call the job B after it completes, then this is what we call it as a downstream. So as the name says, downstream means you trigger one job, okay, like A, and after it completes at the end, you can call another job from this job itself. So this way of calling one job and at the end of it calling another job is called as a downstream project. Okay, or I can say job B is a downstream project for A. That means as the name says down, after A completes, A will trigger or call B. Okay, so that is what downstream job means. Now, when you're calling like this, we can have a dependency in terms of the status of this job. So it is not just blindly A will call B. So there should be reason that you should call, right? So what are the reason? So you can choose a reason whether it is pass or fail. Okay. So that means if you can choose a option saying that if the A completes and after A has completed, if the run of that job is successful, that is what I mean pass. So if the run is successful, then trigger B. That is one condition I can give. Or I can say whenever the job A completes, but it is failing or it is unstable or unsuccessful, then you call another job. That is B. So like this, you can have the specific dependency based on a condition. So now you take the example of what you mentioned by reverting. So if you are running a continuous integration job and in case if it fails either in compilation or in any of the step, what will happen? Jenkins will mark this run exactly as failed. So what we can do is at that point of time, we can call another job after it has completed. So in that case, now in this job, whatever it is calling when it is failed, you can write whatever script or automation that you want to achieve. And through that, you can try to bifurcate. So that means now you know what is the workspace that it has used for the build for whatever step that you have done. So you can use that and you can write some scripts to basically bisect all the changes and find out which exact commit or which exact check-in has caused the problem. And you can unrevert or you can do the revert and try to do the test and do a commit from here itself. So you can use this job as a reverting job. And when they should get called? Only when the A is failing. Or in the same case, suppose you want to send a notification. Okay, now there will be a different requirement for notification. You want to send it to a particular group with some whatever details they want. So how will you send it? By default, Jenkins doesn't have all these options. So Jenkins has a plugin wherein you can send an email with certain details. But if you want to put some specific additional details, then it's not possible. Or now you want to do something additionally after the build is done. Say, for example, you want to update a database with some details based on the build. So when is that going to happen? Only if the build is successful and you don't want to run it always. So in that case, you can give the condition as successful or pass, and then the downstream job will have that details, whatever do you want to do. So this way, this job will get triggered only after the first job is completed, and based on the condition what you have given, whether it is successful or failing, this will get triggered. Okay, so now this kind of dependencies what you can give is what we call it as a downstream job. Getting the point what you asked sometime back, Gokul? So now let me create a downstream job. Okay, so I will just create the name as downstream job. Okay, here let me just say something. Test, and I'm not interested to run it any point of time unless and until the job A calls or the CI calls. So here I'll just put a statement calling, sorry, running downstream job. So now if you look, this is not going to get triggered unless and until we do it manually because there is no scheduled, right? So let's see how we can put a downstream from this. So here, to give a downstream, go to the configure again. And now, what do we mean by downstream? At the end. So at the end means, if you noted, what did I say? After completion of this job. So that means you should complete this and then give how to call this. So in that case, whatever that step that you will give here, it should get completed. So what is that after this you're going to call? That is the post build action. So as part of post build action, what you can do is you can call this option which builds other project. Okay, so now here you will give what is the name of the job that you want to call. So now I'm going to call it downstream job. So this is what I've given, and then you have to give what is the condition that you want to give. So the first condition is stable. Stable means this CI run, whatever happens, is successful. There is no error. And if it is successful, then call this. Suppose if it is failing, then you can call this. And what is this unstable? Unstable means when it keeps on running and every time it fails, only then the condition will be called as unstable. So failed means only for the first time that from the stable it is failing. So you can choose in that way based on your condition. So let's say just calling it on the successful. So apply. Okay. So now let me just do a build now. So since I'm forcibly building it, it will go ahead and do the build, right? So, okay, I've given this Maven package, so it's trying to run that step. Anyway, it'll fail because we don't have given any configuration. So why is it slow? Because it is trying to take some time to recognize. So it has compiled everything, it has run, Okay, and it has done the build successfully. So now if you look in our Jenkins CI, so we created a successful build, and after completing, look what it is doing. It is triggering a new build for downstream job, right? And what is that? And if you look, it has called one. And if you click this, you can see this has been started by the CI job. And what is the build number correspondingly? 3, and whatever steps that you want to give. So this way, you can trigger one job based on the condition whether it is completing successfully or not. Getting it? Suppose if you fail this condition, what will I do here is I'm just giving a command so that it will fail. Okay, but the condition what I'm saying here is successful. So let's build this now. Hmm, It didn't fail. Okay, so now if you see, it basically failed. Okay, so it's saying that it was not able to run the command, some junk error. So it doesn't let us not worry about it, but it says that the build failed, correct? So corresponding to it, if you look, we have only two build because when we did the first time, the third build happened, and the next time I tried to make some failure by giving exit one, that didn't happen. So it was a successful. So for this, the second happened corresponding to 4. But now if you see, the fifth build failed, but it didn't call this job because the condition what we have given is call this downstream job only if this is successful. But since this CI job failed for this run, it is not going to call this. Getting it?
Yes, sir.
In the same way, suppose you wanted something reverse in the condition. That is, say you have the job, but you don't want to trigger like this. What you want is whenever you call this job, it should check based on a condition on another job and see whether it is successful or not. So what I mean by that is, let's take this. Okay, and let me remove this. Now, whenever you are going to call job B, okay, now this is dependent on job A. But what will happen here now is every time you want job B to run, job A should also run, right? Only if the job A runs, this is getting called. So for the example, what we saw like sending mail or uh, doing some automation for the bisect, it makes sense. But let's take a scenario that this job B represents a project build. Okay, now in order to build the job B or this product, you don't have to be necessarily building job A, right? That is because you just need some details from it, but you don't have to run this. So in that case, you can put it as a upstream. Okay, so what do you mean by upstream? It's just the opposite. So now if you call job B, you can set a dependency of some other job, and in the same way you can give the condition. So now whenever you call job B, first it will check whether the dependent job has successful or failure completed based on the condition what you have given, and then it will proceed further. So this way you don't have to run the job A, but just check the status. That is the only difference. Okay, so how do you do it? In the same case, come to the downstream, whatever that you want to set. Here, in the build trigger, now the requirement is what? I need to run this build, basically trigger this build only if some dependent job is either successful or failure, right? So here we will use this, that is build periodically. Okay, and in this we will give the name of the job, and we will give the condition whatever that you want to check. So this way, now even though you schedule something or run, what will happen is Jenkins will run only if the dependency job, whatever that you have mentioned, has matching the condition based on what you have given. Okay, so this way it will not run this job at all. It will just check for the dependency, and based on whatever information that you want to get, you can get and go ahead with running it. So the main difference between downstream and upstream is, in the downstream, the parent job has to complete, only then it will call the child or the downstream. But on the upstream, the downstream job, whatever you have, will just check for the parent job, whereas it will not trigger the parent. Okay, so this is the only scenario whenever you have these kind of things you can set. If not, majorly downstream is what we'll be using. And when we are using downstream, we can have more than one job attached to this parent. Now here, if you just go and give a comma separated, you can have as many jobs as you want. And what Jenkins will do is Jenkins will trigger all those jobs, that whatever that you wanted to call. Suppose if you have another two. Okay, so what you can do is you can have the comma separated so that it will call all of them in the order what you have given here, one after the other. Getting it on what is the downstream job and how do you set it up? Basically, this is what we call it as dependency.